I would like to move to our final panel for today. One second, let me spotlight her. There we go. So moving towards our last segment, I'm nothing less than honored to introduce Miss Lynda Lee Smith as our next and final panelist for this International Women's Day seminar. Anything I say about Miss Smith will not be enough to show her accomplishments and the myriad of experiences that she has had in her lifetime. So to start off, she was chosen as the top 40 under 40 business executives from Georgia Trend magazine, and Ford honored her with the Life and Drive Award, which is only given to 7 women nationwide. She is an international public speaker and has presented to the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child in Geneva, and also the Permanent Bureau of International Law. Her work in children's issues allowed her to initiate and host 3 world conferences with leaders from over 30 different countries, as well as serve on the Harvard Law School Advocacy Work Group. She wrote 3 books about optimizing health and wealth creation and has dedicated over 25 years to a healthy and balanced lifestyle. She has made over 100 television and radio talk show appearances throughout her career and continues to give back to her community by serving as the chair of the Johns Creek Convention and Visitors Bureau. She is a huge inspiration to me personally, as she is to many, and thus it gives me immense pleasure to welcome her to our seminar today.
Oh, thank you so much. That is so kind of you. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be here. I thank you for choosing me, especially with the other 2 elite guests that we had. I'm just inspired by their stories.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming on. So going ahead and just starting us off, as I mentioned, you were honored with the 40 under 40 and the Life and Drive Award. What advice do you have for aspiring leaders in terms of hardship and overcoming challenges?
Yeah, so my story may be a little different from the other 2 ladies in that I grew up in a very rural area of Georgia, Southeast Georgia, and by no way is that a bad thing. I'm very proud of my roots, but I was not in a position to have a great deal of opportunity. So some of the advice you received earlier was, go and listen into court cases or go and volunteer for different opportunities. Those opportunities really didn't exist for me in my area. So I was isolated. And so growing up, it wasn't that anyone told me I couldn't do something necessarily, but no one told me that I could either. So I was always very self-motivated and driven, which really helped me to think big, but I wasn't pushed to think big. Women were still in a very traditional role when I was growing up, and still had the household duties. My mother always worked. From the time I was born, she never stayed home, but she also took care of the home and did all of the normal considered female duties that went along with that. And it was very traditional. So I'm coming from a little bit of a different perspective, but fortunately I was a big dreamer, and I just had to find my way. I didn't really have a set mentor or anyone to pull me up. It was just drive and being focused on the end game for me.
Absolutely. I think your roots offer a unique perspective here, as it shows that if you put your mind to something and really work towards it, it is possible, and you've shown that.
Thank you. I think back to going through high school, and I was an award winner. I was very blessed to always be at the top of my class academically. And also I was the first leadership award winner from my school. I didn't even know what that meant. I mean, that was how it was the first award ever given back then. And I remember coming to Atlanta, and remember Atlanta for South Georgians when I was growing up was a long way away. So it was not any place that anyone wanted to drive to. And I remember my parents bringing me to Atlanta. And Truett Cathy, who founded Chick-fil-A, was the speaker. And this was in the early 80s. And I was astonished going to the seminars. It was actually a conference. So all of the high school leadership award winners came together in Atlanta for a conference. And I felt so out of place because they were talking about topics that I had never been introduced to and never been encouraged to think about. And it was truly enlightening for me as a teenager. At the time, I was 15 years old. And I had never been around other cultures. I had never been around really anyone outside of my school. It was truly isolating. So I can relate a lot on the global level to individuals who are feel isolated from the rest of the world. And I think that's why I'm such a global thinker. And as I went into international work, I could truly relate, even as an American, to individuals in developing countries and what they feel like being isolated.
Absolutely. So moving into our next question, since you have advocated on behalf of vulnerable children around the globe through your work with the Harvard Law School Advocacy Group and presenting at the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child, what do you think is the biggest issue facing children globally?
Yeah. So I was advocating for vulnerable children, and for a large portion of those children, they are institutionalized, something that we disbanded here in the United States back in the 60s. We put in place one of the first foster care systems ever in the world. And while that system certainly has a lot of flaws, it is not perfect by any means. It does give children the opportunity to have one of the most basic human needs, and that is a family environment. As human beings, even the human brain does not develop properly when you don't have physical contact. And a lot of people didn't know that. That was one of the things I was educating people about, is you can't take an infant and put them in an institution with no care, with no physical bonding, because their brain doesn't develop properly. And so if you follow institutional care children, they have a lot of developmental issues, most of them, and varying degrees depending on just their own DNA and their ability to overcome. And so a lot of my speeches at the UN was to try and make country leaders realize that when you put these limits on children being able to get into a family environment, whatever that might look like, you are essentially diminishing their development. So a lot of countries have limits. You have to be 2 years old, or you have to be 3 years old before you can go outside of the institution. Well, by that time, the physical damage and psychological damage has already been done. And so I was really trying to bring together diverse leadership from around the world. And that's how I got on the Harvard work group. What we have a lot of times, whether it's male or female, is we have experts in specific areas. So you have an expert in law, or an expert in medicine, or an expert in social sciences, social services, or technology. But bringing all of that expertise together and that diverse thinking and perspective is what allows us to get to some really unique solutions. And that is what I was attempting to do. And so by bringing all of these experts in these various fields together, we realized that there are some solutions that none of the individual specialties were focused on. And so that was some of the fun, exciting work that was going on. And Harvard, even at Harvard, I'm not a PhD. I am a farm girl who grew up in South Georgia. Yes, I have a college degree, but I am not in any way associated with the elite group of graduates from Harvard. So it was really interesting to me that Harvard recognized that what I had was a willingness to lead. They each knew their own specialty, but they didn't know how to bring about the change. And they recognized that I was able to bring people together in a unique manner and bring about change. And that was what we were all striving for, but we were doing it independently of each other. So it was a really unique opportunity for me to be accepted into a group like that, a prestigious group like that, and sort of have them look to me to open the bigger doors at the global level and really create a strategy for how do we bring about change.
Absolutely. I think that experience sounds amazing, and your background and being able to take part in that sounds like a wonderful experience. Do you think
Was.
that children are affected by gender inequality? If yes, how so?
So they are. It depends. And this is why I always tell all of the women that I speak to, there are issues that we here in America are still, climbing the mountain, as one of the previous guests said, and making tremendous strides. But then when you leave our borders and you go into half of the rest of the globe, which makes up the developing world, women are not even allowed to own property in many of these countries. So land tenure, that is something we take for granted here. Those are issues that we overcame, thank goodness to our pioneers, our female and male pioneers who paved the way for us to even be able to vote in 1920. We overcame a lot of those issues of being landowners, being able to own a business, being able to be an economic contributor, even if we were stereotyped or in a disadvantaged situation in comparison to our male counterparts. We at least had the right to do it. These women don't have that right. And they do not have a voice. So one of the messages that I always want to say to American women is we are viewed, even with our continuing challenges here in our country, we are viewed as the leaders for the rest of the world. And so don't forget that. So when you are making strides here, just understand the other women around the world, they're women too. And they're looking to us for inspiration. They get their inspiration from us. And I can't tell you, for the women who are every day, right today, walking to the nearest river to still get fresh water for their family. That's their duty every day, is just to make sure they have water in their household, because they don't have an infrastructure that brings fresh water to their home. Many women are the head of households living on dirt floors. And this isn't just a few women. This is women in over 100 countries around the world. And so just don't forget about them, is all I say. Is, for children, you asked me about the children in these countries are still trying, they just want the most basic fundamental of human needs. And that's just to belong and have an opportunity to be loved. They may be from an adult perspective, being qualified as gender, and they certainly are, because women are not valued clearly in these countries. But the child itself is not aware of the gender inequality until they become closer in their teens and get to adulthood, because they're just trying to survive. And so I always like to bring it back down and add that perspective, because we tend to forget, because we have achieved so much in this country and the fight's not over. And it's been a long, long fight. So we've been fighting a long time. You look at 1920, there was 100 years advocating just to get to 1920, to give women the right to vote. So it didn't come easy. Nothing comes easy. But I want us to all remember we're all to hold hands around the globe and try and bring our fellow females that are still in those very fundamental fights, help to inspire them too. And don't forget about them.
Absolutely. I think it's so amazing that you talk about that, because a lot of us take this narrow perspective of just the US, but to broaden our perspective globally and look around, that a lot of people have it's so much worse, and we have made so much progress, and there's still more to be made. But in terms of gender equality, we have achieved a significant amount more than a lot of countries.
Yes, yes. We are the leader. We are one of the leaders. I won't say we're nowhere near perfect. I don't know that we'll ever, as a human race, ever achieve perfection in any country, but we are, sometimes we get so bogged down in our own issues that we forget, and we sort of get removed from the context of the bigger picture globally. And we tend to think that other people live like us. And I can tell you, having traveled around the world and having met with so many different country leaders and visited slums and really been a part of watching women inspire other women. And I'll tell a story later that just still is so prevalent in my mind. But we forget. It's very easy to get removed from what's going on around the rest of the world, and to just think that everyone's struggles are just like ours, and they absolutely are not.
Yeah. So now that we're already on this topic, how do you think the pandemic has altered the status of achieving this dream of an equal society for all?
Yeah, so I think here in our country, I think, females have traditionally struggled. I won't say there are a lot of men who are stay at home doing all of the work with the children, but the closing of schools has really, I think, hit the moms the hardest, because a lot of the career moms have had to struggle with working all day, trying to keep multiple children, online at the right times. And I've heard these stories from my friends here in this local area, but from around the country, and how hard it has been on them. And so the ones who are still in areas where schools are closed are just struggling, and they're exhausted. They're absolutely exhausted. But I think beyond that, the financial impact at the municipality level and at governments around the world, we're going to recover a lot faster than a lot of the other countries who have been really dependent on a specific industry, or dependent on a specific trade that has been completely shut down because of the pandemic. And so it's going to take them a long time to recover. And that trickles down to the females. So you take countries that females are already struggling just to survive, and now you have a complete shutdown of whatever revenue streams were coming in. It's really devastating. So the good thing is we are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And I think once the United States and Europe starts to recover fully, and people start traveling again, then the other countries will follow suit. But it's hard. It's been hard on everyone. I've been impacted myself. I think there are a few people who have gone through not being impacted in one way or another, either through personal loss of friends and family who have not survived the pandemic, or financially impacted.
Yeah, I think so many people are struggling worldwide right now, and it's important that we take the steps necessary to ensure that their safety is prioritized.
Yes.
So moving into the next question, in your experience, what are the pros and cons of working with other females in leadership positions?
So this is something I was hoping that my predecessors would have brought this up. So I have had interesting experiences. I went into primarily, I've spent most of my career in the nonprofit. I like to change the world, and there are ways to change the world in whatever role that you take. But nonprofit allowed me to work globally and to really have that cultural experience, which I so much enjoy, just working with other countries and other individuals and hearing the stories. I love to hear the stories. But so I've spent most of my career in nonprofit. But, in nonprofit, you tend to see a higher ratio of females versus male, partly because nonprofit historically has paid less. And so females typically would go in. It's also an area, because it's so heavily female, is sort of shunned as not being real business. It's interesting when you work in nonprofit, you may, for me, I've always been on the revenue side of fundraising. So you can go out and raise millions and millions of dollars, but males specifically on the for-profit side do not see you as an equal if they're in sales, for example. So they may raise 50 million, they may sell $50 million worth of product, but they don't see the equivalence of you going out and raising $50 million. And I always say, well, let me tell you, go out and don't have a product in your hand, and go out and sell a concept. And then you'll find out what true sales really looks like, because selling concepts or selling opportunities to change the world versus having a product to sell is very different. So I always took a lot of pride in making that analogy. But so women can be, unfortunately, they can be the greatest asset of a bold and blazing personality. And I am, by definition, a bold and blazing personality. So I'm a visionary, I'm a strategist, I'm always pushing forward, and I'm always looking at the end game and keeping my eye on the end game. So some women can be extremely threatened by bold personalities of other women, especially if they're not confident. And that's one of the things I want to say to all of you and anyone listening is believing in yourself, knowing who you are, and recognizing that you are uniquely made. You may not be the greatest communicator. That may not be your gift. You can learn to do that, but you have innate gifts that you were born with. And you need to constantly be pursuing what those are so that you know this is my gift and this is what I do very well, so that you never have to worry about someone telling you you can't do this or you're not good enough. You know that you're good enough, because some of my experience have been, if I had not been an extremely confident and bold individual, there are many women who are not as self-confident who get threatened by strong women. Men can also get extremely threatened. And of course, in the male environment, you're also overcoming stereotypes and stigmas. So, it goes back to, oh, she's blonde. Oh, she must not be intelligent. Those kinds of crazy stereotypes that jokes are made from, they really do exist. And so you have to know as a woman that when you go into a room, whether it's a boardroom or it's a negotiating table, that you need to be so self-aware that you are overcoming those obstacles. And women can sometimes be the most vicious, vindictive to other women. And I hate to say that, because on the other hand, on the flip side of that, there is nothing greater or more empowering than being in a room with a group of confident, successful, and bold women. Because we don't get into the jealousy and the envy and all of those little human issues that we tend to have, because we're comfortable in who we are. So being comfortable in who you are and always remembering to lend a hand to another female to pull them up and not try to push them down is something that, that's a message I would say. So it's not always our males that are our greatest challenges in the workplace. It can be females as well. So you just need to be self-aware, be confident. Don't stop being who you are, but just be aware that can happen. And it's unfortunate because, again, there is the upside where you have the greatest females who are working for you every day and recognize you for who you are. So you really have to stay true to you and know who you are.
Absolutely. I think being yourself and finding who you are, like your strengths and everything, is so super important, and being confident in that, whether you stand up to just your school or the community. It's just really important to have that confidence in yourself. So moving into the next question, how does being a bold and blazing leader both serve and hurt you as you move up the corporate ladder?
Yeah. So just tagging on to what I was saying previously is, first of all, knowing you're bold and blazing. Going back to my roots, today you have so many opportunities to take tests online, and I challenge you to do that. You really need to know who you are, because something that comes natural to you, you may think, or at least I'll say, I used to think, oh, everyone thinks that way. I didn't think it was anything unique about it. So the fact that I was a visionary, and as a teenager, I was already deciding what I wanted my life to be. And I was in dirt roads in South Georgia, but I knew what kind of house I kind of wanted to live in. I kind of knew I wanted to be wealthy enough to be able to have impact. I wanted to be able to give back, always be giving and not having to receive, right? I knew all of those things, and I was taking the steps even then to move in that direction. But I didn't have anyone giving me personality tests or any of those things. So I was much older before I started to realize, oh, I'm not like everyone else. I actually had people to have to tell me, no, everyone doesn't think like you. And I remember the first time someone told me that, I was 25 years old. I'd already gone to college and had already gone through my first executive position. And someone said, I don't know why you think everyone thinks like you. And I had to process that. So knowing who you are and taking advantage of the resources you have to learn as much about yourself and your DNA and what's natural to you, that gives you an advantage over the next person and really helps you to be self-aware of how you think, how you behave, what your strengths are, and even what your weaknesses are. You don't want to succumb to your weaknesses, but you want to know what they are. I know I get bored really easily, and I hate minutia. So detail for me, so Lynn is an accountant. I would have been a horrible accountant, because for me, I'm always looking at the big picture, right? I'm always envisioning and I'm always strategizing, but I hate the little detail work. I hate getting down into the details. I can do it, but I don't like to do it. So knowing those little simple things about yourself really helps you. But if you are that bold and blazing person, just know that everyone is not going to receive that well. Okay, if you're CEO and you're bold and blazing, which you typically want a bold and blazing CEO, that's great, because everyone rolls up to you. But if you're a couple of layers down, you can definitely be seen as a threat to males and to females. And you just need to know that. It doesn't mean you're going to be someone else or try to change, but just be aware that you have to figure out how to work with the other personalities, or they'll try to cut you off at the knees.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Just wanted to ask a joint question real quick. So being a writer and a lifestylist, what piece of advice do you have for women globally to help maintain a healthy lifestyle? And as well as what advice do you have for young girls that aspire to be like you, as a lot of us look up to you, since your journey is proof that with hard work and determination, anything is possible?
Oh, thank you. Well, passion and purpose. So knowing, what your purpose is, and we all have one, and staying true to that, and then being passionate about whatever it is that you decide to do. If you don't have passion behind it, you're not going to excel to the level that you could. So don't get stuck in a rut. I tell the individuals that I mentor all the time, just because you took a job because you needed income does not mean you have to stay there forever. It is a means to an end. So I'm really big in my books about talking about life strategy, creating a life strategy. Treat your life as though you're running a company and you are the CEO of your life. All of my podcasts are tagged with, you are the CEO of your own life. Make decisions as though you were the CEO, and you were there to have impact. So the other piece is build your own personal board of directors. This is something that I talk about in all of my books, but you know, if someone had told me when I was younger to do this, I would have been so grateful, but it never occurred to me. And so I was meandering along, you know, and succeeding, but without any real guidance or direction. You are surrounded by great, talented individuals. Lynn Riley, you know, all of these individuals who can be your mentor. And when you have to make a life decision at your age to say, should I go left or right? And what is the consequence? So not to tell you what to do, but to give you all of those decades of experience so that you don't have to make the same mistakes that we've made. So do that. The other piece is let your story drive your strategy. Don't try to be somebody else. You know, we all have a story to tell. Mine is a rural story, you know, growing up in Southeast Georgia, very isolated. A lot of you come from very varying cultures and backgrounds. Embrace that. You know, that's what, first of all, it's what makes this country great. But it's what makes each one of us great. We each have our own unique story of challenges, of obstacles to overcome, and every obstacle that you overcome just makes you stronger. Okay, so even being a woman in a male-dominated environment, like I was initially in South Georgia, it made me stronger. It opened my eyes, and it let me know I had to work a little harder to achieve the same results, but that was okay. I was willing to do that. We all are going to have to do that at some point in our life. Be willing, recognize it for what it is, but just keep on, don't let anybody close the door on you. And lastly, I would just say, run your own race. Don't be busy or distracted looking left or looking right at what other people are doing. You stay focused on your end game and run your race, and then you'll win your race. If you look to the left or right to see who's a little bit ahead or behind you, you just get distracted. Don't worry about other people. Just be who you are, and you will succeed.
Thank you. Those words are very inspiring to, I'm sure, a lot of the individuals and students here today, as a lot of us relate to a lot of the things that you mentioned there. With that, I would like to thank you for joining us here today. Your words were so impactful to all of the students here listening. And thank you so much. We were so happy to have you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure and an honor for you to include me. Thank you very much.